Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us today as we come together to learn more about modern authentication in cloud apps using Azure AD B2C. My name is Hassan Mohsini. I'm the program manager for Microsoft Reactor in Abu Dhabi. Microsoft Reactors are hubs for founders and developers to meet, learn, and connect to local peers, as well as industry-leading ideas and technology from Microsoft, partners, and the open source community. It's also home to the Microsoft for Startups program. With a diverse mix of hands-on workshops, expert panels, and community events, there is something for everyone. Check out our calendar of events on meetup.com and join our coming sessions. Our speaker today is Daniel. Okay, Daniel is a software engineer who's passionate about Microsoft technologies, awarded with Microsoft Most Valuable Professional title. He actively shares his knowledge on Microsoft Azure, IoT, Universal Windows Platform, and DevSecOps. Pluralsight author, Daniel also runs a technical blog, which is techmindfactory.com, and shares code samples on GitHub. I'll provide the links to both his technical blog and the GitHub for you to visit his pages. And feel free to ask questions during the session. We will have regular stops to answer these questions, and also feel free to tweet about the session and tag us on Reactor Abu Dhabi. That's the Twitter hashtag, and at MSFT Reactor is the Twitter handle. And make sure also you adjust the playback settings for today's session so that you can select the highest quality for the best experience during this session. And with all that said, I hand over the mic to our speaker to start today's session.
Thank you so much for a warm introduction, Hussam. Let me share the screen. Yeah, so that's my screen. Okay. So thank you so much for joining my session. Before I introduce briefly myself and just show the contact details, I would like to say that it's a pleasure to be here for the second time and present this time the topic related with identity in the Azure cloud. So today we are going to talk about modern authentication in the cloud applications using Azure Active Directory business to customer. And before we start with the topic, I would like to just briefly introduce myself. As Hussam mentioned, I'm a software developer. I was also awarded with MVP title by Microsoft. But the most important for me is to provide the contact links to me, like a Twitter handle, or you can find me on LinkedIn. And I also encourage you to visit my techmindfactory.com blog, where I try to provide at least some interesting content from different areas related with Microsoft Azure Cloud. And that's about me, because this session is about a great service, great identity service available in the Azure cloud called Azure Active Directory B2C. And here I would like to start with the theoretical introduction. So we will go through some slides and we will discuss different functionalities, different capabilities of B2C. And then, of course, I have some demos for you just to present different scenarios, different integration scenarios for B2C. So I hope you will find this session helpful and interesting. Okay, so let's start. So for some of you, B2C, you can be familiar with this service. So, before we move forward, I would like to just briefly introduce to this identity service. So, Azure Active Directory B2C is identity as a service available in the Azure cloud. So, to make it simple, that service that is available for you to integrate with your applications to provide authentication for users. So it doesn't matter if you have mobile applications, if you have web applications, if you have desktop applications, there is always a question: how to provide secure access to different kind of applications. And you can do it with Azure Active Directory B2C. So with this identity as a service, we can securely authenticate our users, our customers with their preferred identity providers. So on the left side, you can see that we can integrate B2C with different social media identity providers, for instance. So if you would like to sign in to the application using your Twitter account, Facebook account, it's of course doable, and we can easily integrate B2C with those social media accounts. But of course, there can be many other identity providers which can be integrated with B2C. And of course, what is also important to mention that there are many different capabilities inside B2C, and today we are going to talk about it. And before we jump in, I would like to also talk about one or two, I would say, important aspects of security and identity. So there is user authentication and user authorization. And Azure Active Directory B2C, by default, is the service to provide authentication for users. And let me put an example just to make sure that we are all aligned what is happening here and what we are talking about. So you can try to imagine that at the hotel, you would like to check in. So you will be asked to provide a passport. And at the receptionist will look at your passport and say, okay, it's Daniel. Yes, so it's the proof that we are who we are, who we declaring to be. So basing on the passport or some other ID provided by our government, receptionist is able to provide a key, so we can enter the hotel room. And this is authentication. So we prove that we are who we present to be. But on the other side, there is authorization. So once we confirm that we are who we are, so in my case, I'm Daniel, then I will get a key, but with this key, I will be able to open only a specific room in this specific hotel. So that's also important. So I will not be able to go with this key and open some other rooms on other floors in this hotel. So that's about authorization. So authentication is about proving who we are, and authorization is about managing permissions to which places I will have access. So B2C is about authentication by default. And right now, when we go through different functionalities, different capabilities of Azure Active Directory B2C, one of the most important aspects here is custom branded identity solution. So if we have different kind of applications, maybe this is the application for eShop, or maybe this is an application in our company, and we would like to provide a custom branding. We would like to provide custom background. We would like to adjust colors. Yes, so we can have different brand guides in our companies. And in this case, it's possible to customize all the pages in the B2C, like login page or registration page. We can customize them. So as you can see on the left side, this is the branded look of the login and registration website side of the B2C. And as you can see, there is a custom background, there is green button, and of course there are some other social media identity providers like Google, Microsoft, and Facebook. And of course we can customize those UIs using HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. So nothing fancy here. We just have access to HTML code, CSS styles, and we are able to customize this look and feel. What is also important to mention here, as I mentioned at the beginning, that we are able to provide a single sign access with user provided identity here. So Azure Active Directory B2C provides support for different protocols, including OpenID Connect, OAuth 2.0, and SAML. So in this case, we can integrate those different identity providers, and also we can talk to different APIs secured by B2C. So that's also important to mention that B2C is aligned with the standards that are available on the market when we talk about user authentication. What is also important to mention is something what is called progressive profiling. Let's say that we have an application where a user can register, can create an account, and then can sign in. And we would like to collect some information about user profile or about user during the login process and sign up process. So to avoid confusion that we require so many fields at the beginning, so many different attributes, we can create a sign up page, collect only a small amount of details like email, password, and maybe age. And then what will happen during the next login to the solution or next logins, we will be able to ask user for more details about their profiles. So after we collect the age, we can then ask about, I don't know, favorite color or about the place of birth, etc. So it's also important to mention here that this progressive profiling is available in the B2C. So this registration process is not so invasive for users at first glance. So we can just do it step by step during the future logins. And also, as you remember, I mentioned that Azure Active Directory B2C is authentication service, not authorization service. But it doesn't matter in this case, because if we have users in external stores, so let's say that we already have some on-premises systems and we keep user accounts there. So what we can do, we can still integrate using APIs provided by those systems. We can integrate B2C with those external systems. And this is very important because you can try to imagine, let me put a simple example. You can try to imagine that during the login or registration process, we would like to also collect some additional information, or we would like to just confirm that this user was already created before in the on-premises store. So that's also doable. We can integrate B2C with different kind of APIs using different standards. And yeah, and this is something what is also related with previous step. It's called third-party identity verification and proofing. And what is about, so what we are talking about here. So what we can do, we can verify using external services that user that already signed in have access to some specific resources. Or what we can do, we can add custom notifications. So you can try to imagine that I'm trying to sign into the application. I provided my username and password, and then the B2C can call external service. I will receive an email, and I can confirm my account or some other information. So it's also very important to mention that we are able to provide this verification and proofing with third-party systems. So when you try to think about integration and limitations of B2C, they are really small, because even if something is not already available by default in the Azure Active Directory B2C, you have still this possibility to integrate B2C with the APIs, and you can customize the login, registration flows, and some other like password reset or profile edit. So it's also doable. And with that, with the functionalities of the B2C, of course, there can be a question related to integration. So great, okay, Daniel, so we have this B2C. We created this service in the Azure cloud, which I will show you during the demo. We have this identity provider. We would like to integrate our applications. So we have desktop applications, we have web applications, mobile applications. So how we can do it? And there is a place for Microsoft Identity Platform. So just to make it simple, Microsoft Identity Platform is I would say like a management package that enables you to integrate your applications. So Microsoft Identity Platform is Auth2.0 and OpenID Connect standard compliant authentication service. It provides open source libraries called Microsoft Authentication Library, MSAL. So you can use those libraries with different languages. So there are MSAL libraries for Android, for iOS, for Universal Windows Platform, for web applications. So many different kind of platforms and languages. It's worth to mention that. There is also application management portal. So we can see which applications are integrated with our Azure Active Directory B2C. And of course, what we can do, that there is, of course, there are some additional resources like documentation or information about API configuration and connection with Microsoft Graph API. So Microsoft Identity Platform, I would say, is like a box where we have where we have a possibility to use different libraries and different tools to integrate our applications with Azure Active Directory B2C, but not only, because with the standard Azure Active Directory too. So that's about Microsoft Identity Platform. And today we are going to talk about integration between Azure Active Directory B2C and web and desktop applications. So I would like to talk how to use those Microsoft Authentication libraries to secure our web and desktop applications, and how to provide user authentication. And before we jump into the demo, I would like to also mention just one slide about pricing. This session is more technical, but I think it's worth to mention that one of the advantages of Azure Active Directory B2C is pricing. Because first 50,000 monthly active users are for free. And monthly active users, you can consider them as users that actively sign in to the solution during 1 month. So then we start from 50,000, and after that, it's for the next 50,000. There is a price, as you can see here. So we can easily count the price for some amount of users. But again, if you think about creating your custom identity platform, so let's say that you have web application or solution on Azure, and you would like to provide user authentication, it's better to go with the verified, with the secure solution like Azure Active Directory B2C than with creating a custom solution. Believe me, it's not a good idea. And what is also worth to mention, that we can secure different kind of applications with B2C, and we can provide access for internal users in our organization and externals. But I will talk about it later during this presentation. And here I would like to jump into the demo. But before that, I will just stop for a minute. Maybe there are some questions. So yeah, so I'm happy to answer them if I know the answer, of course. I'm not sure if... Hello? Okay, I see that. Okay, so I see some questions here, and what okay, so let me, because I see some questions related with airbag, related with LDAP, and some other questions. So maybe let's agree that we will just finish the demo session. I will try to do it briefly, and at the end we will discuss about different approaches, because this topic related with authorization, authentication, B2C, different solutions is quite large. So I would propose just to move forward with the demo, just to make sure that we are all aligned, we know what's happening, and then I will try to answer all questions. Can we agree on that? I'm not sure if Husam is available. Yes, Husam, do you hear me?
Yes, very well.
Okay, so I'm not sure if you heard what I told just a minute before.
Yeah. We can keep the questions for after your demo, as you said. That will be beneficial for the community. And until then, please, for all the community members that are on the stream today, feel free to continue asking questions, and we'll cover that after Daniel's demo.
Yeah, so just to make sure that we will go through everything, and then we can just talk about it. Okay, so let me start with the first demo. So here, what I prepared for you today is the introduction to the B2C. So let me start with the Azure portal here. So here in the Azure portal, I've already created Azure Active Directory B2C tenant. And before we jump into the details, it's worth to mention that here, if you go to the Azure portal and click Create a Resource, and you will try to find Azure AD B2C like this. You will see some different kinds of services, but the one what we are interested in is Azure Active Directory B2C. And as you can see, I can click Create here, and that's an interesting part because we can create Azure Active Directory B2C only from the tenant where we have a subscription connected. So once you have Azure subscription, you can go to the Azure Marketplace, you can click Create Azure Active Directory B2C tenant, and this tenant will be linked with your Azure subscription. So at the end, there will be a billing. Yes, so there will be a pricing connected with this subscription. So once you create the service, this service will be available as a catalog. So you have to go to the catalog that you created during creation of B2C. And here you will have access to the B2C service. Like, let me go to the home. There will be under Azure Services, Azure AD B2C. And this is the management blade for the Azure Active Directory B2C tenant. And what is important to mention here, this is the whole portal for managing B2C. I've already created one, and of course we can integrate applications with this B2C tenant. So before I describe what's happening here in the portal, let me open Visual Studio and launch the Universal Windows Platform application just to show you the integration. Okay, great. Here is the Universal Windows Platform application. And as you can see, there is a button, sign in. I can click this sign in button. And here, as you can see, there is a login page displayed. And what we can do here on this login page, we can either sign in with our account or we can sign up with the new account. So we have this possibility to create new user account. And then if I go back, let me go back here to the login page. Now, if I sign in, so I will just put some test account here. Let me do it quickly, like this. There is a welcome screen, and of course, we are able to go inside the application and access functionalities. But the case, the most important part here is that those window that I showed you is integrated with Microsoft Authentication library. It's from this library. So if I go back to the solution here and I open this Universal Windows Platform project, and by the way, all these projects are available on my GitHub in the Identity Developer Templates repository. I will provide the link at the end. But here, if I right click on the Universal Windows Platform application and go to Manage Packages, I have here Microsoft Identity Client. And as you can see, this Microsoft Identity Client is Microsoft Authentication library for .NET. So this library is integrated with Microsoft Identity Platform. And as I mentioned before, we can use those libraries with different kind of applications. This can be desktop, mobile, web, and also with different languages. So not only C#, but also with Java or Swift. So it's available. So here, what is the most important to mention is the fact that we do not have to customize this look and feel inside the source code of the application by itself. We can integrate with this Microsoft Identity Client library. So here, I will just show you briefly Authentication Service class. Inside this class, we are creating public client application builder. Here, public client app, and we have to here invoke method acquire token silent and execute async. And then this window, as I presented you, will be shown. So we do not have to write any custom login pages, any custom registration pages. Everything is available here by default. And how it is possible? It is possible because in the B2C portal, we have two options to integrate our applications. So there is a tab called Policies, and there are user flows and identity experience framework. So let me start with the user flows. With user flows, we can define different flows of authentication for our users. So here, what I can do, I can click Create New User Flow. And as you can see, I can decide whether this flow will be related to sign up or sign in. Or I would like to provide profile editing here. So there will be also a page where users can update their profile data. Or maybe I would like to provide password reset flow, so enable my users to reset password. Or maybe I would like to just provide sign up page without sign in, or sign in page without registration option. So this is very important to mention that if I click sign up or sign in here, I can click create, and I already created one. So let me show you this quickly. This is my user flow. And that's really easy because here, what I can do, I can click Run User Flow, and directly here from the Azure portal, I'm able to click Run User Flow and test this user flow. And as you can see, this login page here is exactly the same like the one I had in my Universal Windows Platform application. So it doesn't matter if you have mobile platform, desktop platform, web platform, user experience, look and feel will be the same on each platform because those pages are provided by B2C. And right now, of course, you can ask, great, so how we can customize this branding? Probably this can be complicated. And it's not. I thought that it could be complicated in some cases, but with user flows, it's really, really simple. So let me show you that. What we have here, there is a tab called Page Layouts here. And here in the page layouts, we can set different layouts for my B2C pages. So like for the login page, registration page. And also, let me get back here. There is a tab called Company Branding. And if I click default here, you can see that there is a tab where I can provide background image, for instance. I can provide banner logo. I can provide user hint, sign in page text. So as you can see, even I can customize the color, the background color of the login and registration pages. So it's really simple here. I can click upload file and just upload the file with these dimensions. So it's really simple. And at the end, once I add this company branding, if I get back to the user flows, if I click this sign up or sign in and run this flow, I'm able to see this custom branding. And of course, when it comes to the application integration, you can also ask, okay, Daniel, but how B2C knows which application uses it? Of course, there is a tab called Application Registrations. And here, as you can see, there is my web application, for instance, that I will show in a minute, but there is also this Universal Windows Platform application. And here, there are all details that are required to integrate with this UWP application. So as you can see here, I have to provide information that I will integrate B2C with mobile and desktop applications. And of course, once I do it, I have to provide redirect URIs. And then I will be able to use Microsoft Authentication library here and provide the client ID. So here, once I'm creating this public client application that is provided with SAL library, I have to provide the client ID. And this client ID is available in the Azure portal for my application. So that's why we are able to integrate our applications with B2C. So every single application that has to be integrated with the B2C has to be also registered here in this Azure B2C portal. Okay, so right now, let me switch to the another topic just to make sure that, yeah, I got it. So right now, what is also important to mention is the case related with users. So there is a tab called Users, and here I can have all the users that are in my Active Directory B2C. So it's also important that you as an administrator of the B2C tenant, you are able to see different user accounts. You can manage them. You can block them, for instance. So here, if I select this sample user account, we can see some different attributes like my first name, last name, user email. But also there is a possibility to reset password, or we can just block this account. And what is important to mention is the fact that we can integrate Azure Active Directory B2C with the Microsoft Graph API. So Azure Portal is one thing, but we can also use Microsoft Graph to manage those actions in the B2C. Not all, not yet, because there is also Azure AD Graph, but Microsoft is constantly migrating different operations. So that's important to mention. And of course, if we have users, we can have attributes. So here we have tab called User Attributes. So if you would like to collect different information about users, so the city, country, a given name, job title, street address, state, different kind of attributes, you are able to do it, and there are built-in attributes here. But if you would like to collect some additional attributes, it's also doable. We can click Add button here. We can provide the name of the attribute, like for instance, I don't know, system external system ID. We can type that this will be like a string, let's say. We can add description, and once I click Create button, this attribute will be visible here on this list, and we will be able to use it in the user flows. And now, with reference to the user flows also and integration with external identity providers, there is also another tab called Identity Providers. So if we would like to integrate our application, the B2C login, with external identity providers, it's doable. We can use this tab here, and we can say that, great, we would like to integrate with Facebook. We would like to integrate with Amazon. We would like to integrate with LinkedIn, OpenID Connect, Microsoft. So as you can see, many different kind of identity providers. And if you have any additional identity providers that are compatible with OpenID Connect, as you can see, there is this tab OpenID Connect. And what we can do here, we can provide details about the external identity service, and we can integrate it. So once I add the connection with Facebook, for instance, here, what I can do, I can go to the user flows. I can click sign up or sign in user flow, and I can decide here which identity providers I would like to add to this login page. So if I go to the identity providers here, you can see that I selected Facebook, local account, and OpenID Connect. So right now, once I connect those identity providers and I click Run User Flow, you will be able to see that there is standard login page, but also there is a possibility to sign in with Facebook or this OpenID Connect identity provider. It's like called internal partner. I will talk about it at the end of the demo. If I go here and I disable this option and click Save, and it will take, as you can see, a few seconds, and I will run this flow once again, you will notice that Facebook logging with Facebook is disabled. So here it's very fast, very intuitive, to manage access to our applications using Azure Active Directory B2C. As you can see, I'm doing everything in the Azure portal. And then let me enable this Facebook once again. But then what is also important to mention before we move forward, it's also worth to mention that we can enable MFA, so multi-factor authentication. And also what we can do, we can decide for which user flow we would like to enable multi-factor authentication. So let me present it. As you can see here, there is overview tab for my user flow called sign in or sign up. Here I can click properties. And here there is a tab called multi-factor authentication. And as you remember, let me remove this application quickly. As you remember, in the UWP platform application, I sign in without confirming the code from SMS message. But now, what I can do, I can enable MFA, click Save, and right now with my phone, let me quickly show you this. With my phone, I can go to the application. I can click sign in, provide email and password. Let's check. Was this account? Yes. And as you can see, there is information. How would you like us to provide the code? So either call me or send a text message. I will just click send the code. I got the code here in my message, just to make sure that I'm not cheating here. I can provide this code 834373. Let me confirm it. And as you can see, there is also welcome message. So enabling MFA here, so multi-factor authentication in this application was as quickly as you saw, a few clicks and that's it. So let me disable this MFA right now. And let me get back to the main tab. Yeah, I showed you this, Sal also. Yeah, so there you can ask, once again, let me open the main blade. So then you can ask, okay, Daniel, so great, but there are different policies. There are user flows and there is identity experience framework. So which one is responsible for what and which one should I choose? And that's the very good question, and I would like to answer this question here. So with user flows, if you would like to provide standard authentication for users, if you would like to integrate B2C with identity providers like Facebook or Google, if you would like to enable MFA, if you would like to connect like custom attributes, user flows are perfect here. But we can have also scenarios where we have to integrate with external systems. So try to imagine that, for instance, you are the user and you would like to authenticate in the B2C, but then there should be additional verification using external system using some API. So let's say that once I sign in, I have to also provide like an employee number, and this employee number has to be verified by external system. Then this external system has to provide the answer for the B2C, and then B2C will decide whether should agree to sign you in or not. So every custom scenarios which requires integration with external systems, external user stores, any custom implementations of authorization stores, which I would like to also describe at the end of this session, those scenarios are the best for identity experience framework. So if you know that you will not integrate with any external system, you would like to only provide authentication for your users in your apps, you would like to enable MFA, you would like to easily manage those users, and you would like to provide a custom branding, user flows is the way you should go. But if you know that you have complicated flows where you have to verify user identity with external stores. You would like to provide authorization mechanism. So like, for instance, check in which groups users are assigned. Then you have to go with identity experience framework. And let me quickly talk about identity experience framework and custom policies here. And here I will switch to the web application then. Let me set this as startup project. Yeah. Let me launch the application. Here, with reference to the Identity Experience Framework, Identity Experience Framework provides everything what is available in the user flows. So once again, if I get back here to the portal, there is User Flows tab, and we can manage everything. But Identity Experience Framework is for advanced scenarios. And as you can see, once I click, okay, let me launch this application. Once I click Identity Experience Framework, there are less options to choose. So of course we have app registrations, because those apps are the same for the B2C between user flows and custom policies. But there is only one important tab, custom policies here. And as you can see, there is no management portal. So this is for advanced scenarios. As you can see, there are no buttons, no switches. Everything what we are going to do here is in the XML files. So let me quickly show you how such XML file look like. Of course, I will not go through everything what is here, because believe me, it's quite complicated and it's not so easy to learn that. But you can see that there is a structure in this XML file, and this is, for instance, XML file for sign up or sign in policy. So you remember that I show you this sign up or sign in user flow, and it was easy as it was. There was a button, page was open, I could sign in. And this is the same, but for identity experience framework. And here, as you can see, I can define which user attributes will be stored in the token that will be returned to the user. But also, what is the most important to mention here is the fact that I can integrate B2C with external services in Azure. So in this case, Azure Functions. So as you can see, this is Trust Framework Extensions XML file. And inside this file, under Claims Provider, I can define a call to the Azure function. So in this specific scenario I'm showing you, the scenario is like this. I'm logging in as a user. B2C, in the meanwhile, will call Azure function. Azure function will verify the user record in the Azure SQL database. Groups for the user will be retrieved and returned to the B2C. So as you can see here, I have this output claim that will be included in the JOT token at the end. And here I can embed all the authorization groups of user in the JOT token. And that's really important. So this is one of the scenarios for custom policies. And as you can see, there is a lot of XML code. It's not so complicated when you have some samples, and believe me, there are samples on GitHub. I will also provide the link. But you have to realize that custom policies are not so easy to start with. So if you do not have any custom scenarios related with with Identity Experience Framework, I would recommend to go with the user flows. And here, let me show this demo with the web application. So it was launched here. As you can see, this is my web application. And as you remember, I mentioned that B2C is for authentication, but not for the authorization. So there are no, so B2C by default does not provide any authorization mechanism. But what we can do, we can integrate B2C with external stores, like with the function app that we'll call a SQL database. We'll get user groups, put those groups inside the token, and this token will be returned to the web app. And web application will decide whether specific content should be displayed for the user or not. So as you can see here, there is also web application secured by B2C. And if I click private content, I will be redirected to the B2C login page. As you can see, this is other login page. It's not the same I showed you for the user flows. Those are separate. This one is for the custom policies. So those XML files I showed you. And right now, let's say that I will use this first test account. And I will click sign in. And as you can see, once I signed in, there is a greeting, hello Daniel, that's fine. But there is also information that access is denied. And this is because once I signed in, B2C called Azure function called Azure SQL database. All the groups were retrieved, and probably I'm not in the group that is allowed to access this tab. But now if I click sign out, and I will try to use another account in this case. So let me use this one. And I will click sign in. Right now, as you can see, there is my first name, last name, and my photo. So ad hoc, there is no authorization mechanism provided by B2C, but we can do it with custom policies, Azure Functions, and Azure SQL database. And now if I go to the source code, let me disable the application for a minute. What we can see here, let me open Pages folder, and this is this private content side. As you can see, there is authorized attribute, and there is policy called employee. And this means that only users that are in the employee group will be able to access this specific content. And of course, here I integrated those policies. So what I'm doing here in the authorization, there are authorization policies. And as you can see, once we access the web application with the token, what we do here, we have to check whether there is a claim in the token called extension authorization groups, and whether user in the token has the group that is allowed to access this specific site. So if the user is in the employee group, that's fine. Let's display this page. But if this user is not in this group, then there will be access denied display. And right now, let me show you just briefly one more thing here. You can also ask, what about external identity providers? If I would like to integrate with Facebook again. So again, we have to do it using those custom policies here. So everything what we are doing with Identity Experience Framework has to be done using those policies. And to make it easier, there is also an extension available for Visual Studio Code that helps managing those policies, but still they are more complex. So even in the official documentation, Microsoft mentions that for all scenarios that does not require any custom flows, user flows are the way to go. So the first step. And if you would like to add some custom scenarios, then you have to go with Identity Experience Framework. And again, you can also ask, great, but how did you secure this web application? And the answer is Microsoft Identity Web Library from Microsoft Identity Platform. So here, if I go to install, you can see that I have this Microsoft.identity.web package here in my application installed. And with this package, I'm able to secure my web application with the tokens that are returned from the Azure Active Directory B2C. And again, of course, I have to register this web application, get the client ID, and then use this client ID in the request during the user authentication. Okay, great. So at the end, let me close this one and let me get back to the presentation for a second. Yeah, so that's the scenario for custom policies. So you would like to provide user authentication, so verify users, but you would like to also add those users to some groups. So here is the way to go with custom policies, so identity experience framework. So we can, during the login process of user, as you can see, Azure Active Directory B2C calls Azure function. This Azure function calls SQL database in Azure and retrieves all the groups for this specific user with this specific ID. And then those groups are returned in the JOT token that is returned to the web application. And that's why web application at the end can decide whether user should have access to specific parts of the application. So that's the first scenario for custom policies. The second scenario that can be interesting, it's scenario where we would like to provide access for different kind of users. So let's say that in our organization, for instance, we have some internal applications only for our employees. But there are also applications that can be accessed by partners. So we as a company work with different partners, and those partners should also have access to those applications. But at the end, there can be also customers. So we would like to provide a way for customers to register and then sign in. So B2C here is a way to go, because as you can see in this architecture, we can federate Azure Active Directory B2C with the standard Azure Active Directory tenant. So for all internal users in our organization, we can provide access for them. We can also provide access for the partners using Azure Active Directory B2B functionality in the Azure Active Directory. And of course, for the customers, we can provide this access with standard username and password, and also with social media accounts like Facebook, Google, or LinkedIn. So that's really interesting that those, I would say, custom scenarios. So the sky is the limit. Of course, there are some tricky parts. What I can say right now at the end is the fact that if you would like to access B2C users, for instance, and their attributes using Microsoft Graph, it can be tricky because not all the functionalities are migrated yet. So that's the tricky part. So sometimes it's worth to use Azure AD Graph, so the oldest one, and then use Microsoft Graph API to achieve some additional attributes. So yeah, so there are tricky scenarios, but I think that in general it's quite easy to do it. So that's it. At the end, I would like to say, of course, there are questions, and I will try to answer them. But before we go to the questions, I would like to also mention that there is a survey. Here is the link, and please enter the event code that is displayed here. So 8009 at the start of the survey. So thank you so much for joining my session. And right now, I think that we can jump into the question. Yeah.
Yes, thank you, Daniel, for today's session. And there are so many questions in the Q&A section. So if you can switch to that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, of course. Yeah. So let me. Okay. So yeah. So let me scroll down. Yeah, so I see those questions. Okay, so I see the question. So the first one, please correct me if I'm wrong, but Azure Active Directory B2C versus LDAP versus Radius versus login Radius. So I assume I assume that the question is, what are the differences, or yeah. So that's, I assume that what are the differences between those different services, and how to combine them, how to compare them. So with reference to this question, LDAP radius, login radius, Azure Active Directory B2C. When we think about Azure Active Directory B2C, when we would like to compare it to other services, Azure Active Directory B2C is the service that has to provide lightweight way to provide user authentication. So Azure Active Directory B2C is the answer to requests or to questions, how to provide access for external users and how to enable easily integration with applications, but also how to integrate this identity platform with other services like Azure Active Directory, like a standard Active Directory, how to keep all those functionalities, but how to provide external functionalities like integration with external identity providers, with external authorization stores, how to do it easily. So that's the answer for the B2C, how we can compare B2C with any other services. And of course, you can say that great, we can have different services that are similar to the B2C, but in this case, I would say that with B2C, you have, first of all, you have this great management of users. You have everything in place. So the tools, the management portal, integration tools. You have those 50,000 users free at start, so you do not have to worry about the cost at the beginning. And you have all those possibilities to integrate with different application platforms. So that's, I would say, that's what I can say here when it comes to the B2C and how to compare it to other services. Of course, all other services can have those functionalities. So B2C is not the only one, and of course there are protocols, standards like OAuth, like OpenID Connect, like SAML. But B2C gives you everything to combine different words. So enterprise, external users, partners as a single gateway. Okay, so the next question I see here, what is Microsoft solution for RBAC authorization? And that's a great question. So, so what I can answer here. So first of all, of course, RBAC is available in the Azure Active Directory by default and authorization. But when it comes to the Azure Active Directory B2C, there is no groups, and there are no policies. So first of all, it's worth to mention that by default, B2C does not support authorization. But if you remember, I showed you this example with the SQL database where you can put authorization groups for users, or even if you would like to still use some information that is kept in the Azure Active Directory by itself, it's also doable, because during the login process, what we can do, we can call Azure Active Directory using Microsoft Graph or Azure AD Graph, and we can get some information about users, and we can put those attributes in the token. So that's what I mentioned, that even if we do not have authorization by default in the B2C, we still have this possibility to integrate Azure functions, APIs, and get those groups. Next question. Is it possible to inject custom claims in the job returned by B2C? Yes, of course. So that's what I showed you in the Visual Studio Code. If you would like to add some custom claims like external system user ID, you are able to do it. And of course, it's supported by B2C. For those SAL libraries, are there any key limitations or capabilities different between open source languages versus Microsoft one like C#.NET? Okay, so just one for those SAL libraries, are there any key limitations or capability differences between open source languages? Yeah. So when it comes to the Microsoft library, let me briefly open that. When it comes to the Microsoft authentication libraries, currently there are libraries for .NET, for JavaScript, for Android, iOS, Java, and Python. And with reference to your question about the limitations and about custom solutions, because I assume this question is about how we can compare SAL libraries officially supported by Microsoft with other libraries that are open source. So with Microsoft Authentication Library, I think that I would say that there are no too big differences between open source libraries, but you have to remember one thing, that those Microsoft Authentication Library or those libraries are based on some protocols and standards. So underneath, we are talking about OpenID Connect and OAuth 2.0. So if you look on some capabilities and implementation threshold with SAL libraries, it's much easier to provide user authentication in your applications. It works. With those external libraries, you can add some custom functionalities to the login registration. Probably you can extract some additional attributes from the token, etc. But I think, from my perspective, I did not face any issues or limitations when talking about SAL libraries. And I did not have any problems in the web applications and mobile applications. So for me, I think it's good to stick to the official libraries, also because there is a long way journey and roadmap for those libraries, and I can also send you the link that there is a good plan how to extend those libraries. So of course there will be more support. Yeah, does this SAL library support all outs flow, implicit grant, authorization grant, PXE, etc.? No. So right now, as far as I remember, in the SAL library right now, we have this authorization code grant. PXE is also is included, but with the implicit grant. And that's a good question here, because there is something that I did not discover yet, but I want to do it and go through the source code on GitHub. When you want to use implicit grant with your SPA applications, so let's say that you have Angular web application, and here you would like to enable implicit grant, underneath. What I know for today, there is some custom flow implemented. So I'm not sure what it is, but I know that right now it's not so clear. So I'm not convinced about implicit grant in those libraries for web applications, for SPA applications here. But I can confirm it and get back with this question. Is it possible to set up AD B2C using infrastructure as a code, ARM templates, Terraform, etc.? Yeah, so of course, so B2C is a service available in the Azure cloud like all other services. The important part is that, of course, we can create this service using scripts or Azure CLI. But the case is that even if we create the service, then we have to set up, if we're using, of course, those custom policies. And here Microsoft provides the guidance how to also automate creating those B2C policies that I showed you in the Visual Studio Code. Is there a possibility to use this for a complete on-premise application with no internet connectivity? So no, unfortunately, I would say the answer is no, because during the authentication, you have to connect to the B2C. So as I showed you, this desktop application, let's say this Windows I presented, once you click sign in, this website where users can sign in is provided by B2C, and it's so internet connection is required. So I'm afraid that in the complete on-premise application with no internet connectivity, there will be a problem to re-authenticate users. What auth flow does the Universal Windows Platform app use? Is it auth code? Yeah, so right now it's auth code, but what I know, there will be also a PXE in the nearest future. So I can confirm right now that there is authorization code flow for now. Can we use this for multi-tenant app and provide an option to register a new tenant? Can we use for multi-tenant app? Okay, so I'm not sure if I understand this question correctly. Can we use this for multi-tenant app and provide an option to register a new tenant? So I see some problem here, because when we talk about B2C tenant, we have to decide, so we have to create a tenant, and underneath with Azure Active Directory B2C, there will be Azure Active Directory tenant created. And right now, if you would like to use it for multi-tenant app, so I assume that you have web application, and this application is secured by, you can access with different providers. I see the problem here. So I'm not sure if I understand this question correctly, but I think that there is no such option to provide an option to register a new tenant by default. Do these AD B2C attributes map to claims in the JWT token? Of course, they are mapped to the JWT token, as I mentioned before. So of course you can decide which attributes has to be included in the token, and those attributes at the end, if you decode the token, they will be available. Is it possible to create accounts without any email ID at all? Yeah, so good question. And yes and no. So if we would like to create account without the email, so first of all, we can create user accounts using Azure AD Graph. So we don't have to use the Azure portal. There is API that we can use and create those user accounts. But for every user, there is identity required. So it can be in a B2C, it can be either email, but there is also an option. It's quite fresh, but you can also enable login with phone number. So so it depends, yes. But if you would like to provide a way to sign in with phone number, yes, we can eliminate email. But if you would like to just provide the page without email, no, it's not possible. So we cannot omit the email address during the registration. Is it possible to set up MFA with Google Authentication? That's also a good question, and yes, we can do it. So we can, of course, use MFA with Microsoft Authentication, Authenticator app. We can use Google Authenticator, and what is the most important to mention here, we can also build our custom MFA application using custom policies. So, of course, we can use Google, Microsoft Authenticators, and we can also build our custom application, but there is a lot of more work. Is there an option to route the MFA verification to Google Authentication? Yeah, so yeah, there is a way, of course. Auth app, Authenticator, Google, yeah. So it's possible. We can integrate this in the B2C. Is it possible to customize the flow to allow whitelist or deny blacklist based on some custom condition logic? Great question. Yeah, so it's possible, but not by default in the Azure Active Directory B2C. So again, we can use custom policies here, and we can create such custom blacklist store. And then basing on the logic, we can use here either Azure Function or Logic App. I would prefer Azure Function. Azure Function on the login process can call this external store, can check whether this specific user is on the blacklist, and then we can reject login for the user. So of course we can control this flow, and I have to admit that customization using identity experience framework is quite broad, so it's doable. Is it a session being recorded and available to watch later? Yeah, as far as I know, it's always recorded. So yeah, so it will be available on YouTube. The survey for server to so the last question I see here for server to server authentication, is it possible to use of DWA client credentials flow? Yeah, so what we can do here, so you mean to provide this secure connection between two applications, and let me think, with the B2C. With the to see yes, it's doable. Let me say why here. Let's say that we would like to for instance integrate with the Graph API, Microsoft Graph API. So underneath, what I can do, I can sign in with my user account, but in context of my application, I will call Microsoft Graph. So yes, so it's doable to provide server-to-server authentication here, if this is something what you ask for. So of course we can communicate between our application registered in the B2C and other applications or APIs. Okay, so I think that is all about the questions.
Thank you, Daniel. I will start sharing a few things actually I want to share with the community, starting with the survey. Again, a quick reminder to take out the Reactor survey. This helps us also curate content for the upcoming months that are more relevant to the topics that our community members want to see. So please take a minute to fill out the survey and use the event ID, which is 8009, to provide this feedback. And a few upcoming sessions that I also want to share with our community members. There is one on Thursday on building an Ethereum logic app. In this session, we will use Azure Blockchain Service to translate data to and from the ledger, and then use Azure Blockchain Workbench to prototype blockchain apps in the cloud. And on Sunday, August 9, we will have a session on Microsoft approach to cybersecurity. In the session, we will have more insights into Microsoft approach to cybersecurity, covering not only the technological investments, but also the alliances and partnerships that Microsoft has to push for a safer world. And on Monday, we have a workshop on Python. In this workshop, we will explore the basics of Python, such as arithmetic, numeric, and data types. And by the end, you will gain the familiarity you need to start using it on your own. So in this workshop, we will be using Python examples with a Jupyter notebook in VS Code. And on Wednesday, we have a session on Azure SQL database. In this session, we will cover the foundations of Azure SQL database service, showcase multiple demos, and learn why it is the database of choice for a variety of applications. We'll also cover various modern applications, use cases, and customer examples. And of course, there are more sessions on our calendar, so please check it out on meetup.com. And we also would like to join our newsletter. We have a monthly curated email about the Reactor Abu Dhabi upcoming sessions for the month. And also on that link, you can also subscribe to the other reactors and to the global events that we're doing. And you can also subscribe to Azure Dev Community also for more developer news and opportunities to connect locally and online with the developers and explore also the Microsoft Cloud Society for more learning opportunities. Keep in touch. The Reactor offering are broad range of technology, and whether you're just getting started or working on a complex project, I'm sure there is something in our sessions and in our programming that you will find interesting. All the events are always free, so also share them within your network. And with all that said, I also would like to thank again our speaker for today, Daniel,
Thank you so much
for your time. Thank you so much. And we will try to get this session on YouTube as soon as possible. Check out our channel on YouTube, Reactor, Microsoft Reactor. That's the global channel. You can subscribe to it, and the session will be available there, along with other learning opportunities as well, and sessions that you can view on demand from Reactor Abu Dhabi and also from all the reactors globally. Thank you again to everyone that joined us, and stay safe, everyone.
Thank you so much. Bye-bye.